This is week 189 of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I'm Belokur, reporting to you from Kyiv, and I'll be taking you through the top stories from Ukraine this week. And if I look or sound a bit tired today, there is a reason. We're filming this mid-morning, and I was woken up at 2 a.m. by ballistic missiles. Russia launched a mass attack on Ukraine overnight with almost 500 drones and missiles, targeting energy infrastructure. Russian strikes have knocked out a reported half of Ukraine's gas production ahead of winter, and many people here in Kyiv, including KI staff members, have experienced electricity and water blackouts. We were lucky here in Kyiv to not have huge power outages last winter, like we did in the summer of 2024, but if this is where we're at in October, it's looking like one to brace for. Tomahawk, an American cruise missile that would greatly expand Kyiv's radius for deep strikes within Russian territory, has long been coveted by Ukraine. Until now, the US has declined to provide Kyiv with the missiles, but recent weeks have brought hope, albeit tentative, that that tide may be turning. First things first, what is a Tomahawk and what makes it special? The precision cruise missile was developed by the US in the 1970s and was first used in the early 1990s during the Gulf War. Raytheon is currently the only manufacturer producing them. A Tomahawk can travel between 1,600 and 2,500 kilometers, or up to 1,500 miles, and flies at a low, ground-hugging altitude that helps it avoid radar detection. Their warhead can carry hundreds of kilograms of explosives, significantly more than the long-range drones that Ukraine currently uses. All of this makes them ideal for striking high-value, stationary ground targets positioned far from the launching point. If Ukraine were to receive Tomahawks, they could be used to strike Russian military command centers and air bases, logistics hubs, and energy and weapons production centers far from the Ukrainian border. If deployed at scale, Tomahawks could force Moscow to move its air defense further east, stretching its protective umbrella across a much greater swath of territory. While this alone won't win the war for Ukraine, it does have the potential to shift the tempo and landscape of the war in ways that could be advantageous. Think of it like Ukraine's many drone strikes on Russian energy and military infrastructure this summer, but on steroids. The first public signal that the US might be seriously considering supplying Ukraine with long-requested Tomahawks came on September 28th, when Vice President J.D. Vance confirmed that Washington was actively considering the idea. He told Fox News that it was under discussion, but made clear that the decision was ultimately up to President Donald Trump. Trump himself offered tentative indicators this week that he had sort of made a decision and was weighing the terms against the risks. Still, sources close to the president warned that the prospect remains an unlikely hypothetical, citing manufacturing limits and the fact that most of America's existing Tomahawks are already earmarked for its own navy. Although even a few Tomahawks would certainly carry symbolic weight for America's support of Ukraine, particularly if paired with US intelligence about where to strike, analysts say that any lasting advantage the missile could offer Ukraine hinges on repeated access, not just a one-off supply of a handful of them. With a production goal of just 57 of the missiles to be made in 2026, a small fraction of them would at most allow for a few precision strikes, and that'd be the end of it. And harkening back to Trump's vague statement that he needs to know what Ukraine is planning to do with them, it's worth noting that these missiles would come with heavy terms and conditions from the US, because the implications of a deep strike on Russia with American weapons is far different than one with Ukrainian weapons. And what does Russia say? Well, last weekend, President Vladimir Putin warned that supplying long-range missile systems to Kyiv would shatter the positive trends in US-Russia relations and mark a new stage of escalation. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov went further, demanding clarity. Would the Tomahawks be launched by American military personnel or by Ukrainians? Who would decide the targets? Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said that U.S.-Russia relations are collapsing and insisted that any launch of Tomahawks would equate to American involvement in the war. At this point, nobody can really say for sure how likely it is that Ukraine will get Tomahawks or how effective they'd be at reshaping the war. Likely, the renewed discussion about them is a tactic by Trump to get Russia to sit down at the negotiating table, something they've continued to avoid despite repeated efforts on America's part. Threats of sanctions ended in a red carpet for Putin in Alaska, and deadlines and ultimatums have led nowhere. There's no forward momentum driving peace talks whatsoever. As long as Trump continues to deal in hypotheticals and maybes, Russia will remain unfazed. And speaking of Russia remaining unfazed, a colleague visited the site of Friday's attack on Kyiv. I'll let her show you more.
It's been another terrifying night here in Kyiv. I heard multiple explosions of a combined missile and drone attack that Russia launched on capital throughout the night.
Ми знаходимося біля будинку, де проходить ліквідація внаслідок ворожої атаки на Київ нічної. Станом на зараз 10 постраждалих. В задовільному стані їх госпіталізовано до лікарні. Відкритий пункт, де проходить приймання заяв, надається допомога.
Ми тільки підійшли до вікна, коли воно бабахнуло, і в нас по балконі рама. А там горіло таке, знаєте, гаряче полум'я, іскри йшли на наш балкон. Нічого, все закрили, поклали вологі тряпки, і все, і до ранку, до 4:30 сиділи. Russia targeted the capital's critical infrastructure, and the mayor warned that the power and water shortages were possible. So during the night, the entire left bank of Kyiv was left without electricity and faced water shortages. At the moment, all city services are working to restore water and electricity supplies, and in some parts of the left bank, power and water have already been restored.
The saga of the 2022 Nord Stream pipeline explosion, which from the beginning has been like something straight out of a Nordic noir mystery, saw a new update this month when Polish authorities detained a Ukrainian citizen suspected of participating in the sabotage, and then refused to hand him over to the German authorities, who issued the warrant for his arrest. Before we go any further, let me remind everyone what Nord Stream is. The underwater fuel transport pipeline linking Germany and Russia was designed to increase the supply of Russian gas to Europe, while bypassing transit countries like Ukraine. Nord Stream 1's construction began in the late 90s, and it started operating in 2011, and it ran from the Russian city of Viipuri to the northern coast of Germany, and was a primary route for Russian energy giant Gazprom to deliver fuel to Germany. A second pipeline, Nord Stream 2, was completed in 2021 but never saw use. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz suspended its certification on February 22, 2022, due to the Russian parliament's official declaration that the occupied parts of Ukraine's Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts belong to Russia. And we all know what this was a prelude to. 2 days later, the full-scale invasion began, and with it came increased commitment by Europe to wean itself off of Russian gas. Gazprom ceased operations in Nord Stream 1 in August of 2022, less than a month before the explosions damaged the pipeline. Now, back to the recent updates. German prosecutors allege that the suspect, a 46-year-old Ukrainian citizen known only as Volodymyr Z, yes, I know, it's funny, was part of a group of divers that in September of 2022 planted explosives on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 in the Baltic Sea near the Danish island of Bornholm. The explosions severely damaged 3 of the 4 undersea pipelines, and from the beginning it was suspected to be an act of sabotage rather than an accident or malfunction of some kind. Germany, Sweden, and Denmark all launched investigations, but the latter two were closed in 2024 with no conclusion. Germany issued the arrest warrant for Volodymyr Z in August of last year, but he was nowhere to be found. His last known address was in Poland, where he had worked in construction, but Polish authorities believed that he'd left the country. That is, until he was apprehended in a town southwest of Warsaw 2 weeks ago. Following his arrest on September 30th, Volodymyr Z was placed in preliminary custody, and German prosecutors began their request for his extradition to Germany. This is when the international debate about his future began. On October 2nd, Polish intelligence services coordinator Tomasz Siemoniak publicly stated that there was no need to rush the extradition, calling the case extremely serious. This past Monday, a Polish court approved a 40-day custody period for the suspect. On Tuesday, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that extraditing Volodymyr Z would not be in Poland's interest, framing the pipeline itself as an illegitimate strategic project. The problem of Europe, the problem of Ukraine, the problem of Lithuania and Poland is not that Nord Stream 2 was blown up, but that it was built, Tusk stated. Tusk's comments refer to the controversies surrounding Nord Stream prior to the explosion. From the start, critics argued that its construction would deepen Germany's reliance on Russian fuel, and it was a point of debate in energy politics for years before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So, for now, Poland isn't rushing to hand over the suspect. Volodymyr Z's attorney says that his client denies all charges and contests all requests for extradition. Another Ukrainian suspect detained in Italy in August is also being kept in detention while his extradition to Germany is contested. Kyiv is suspiciously quiet on the matter, saying that it's up to the Polish courts and they won't be getting involved in anything more than a consular role. Volodymyr Z will remain in Polish custody for at least the next month and likely longer. We'll be back with updates if he's extradited, but for now, that prospect seems remote. The Kyiv Independent is a reader-funded news outlet, meaning that shows like this are only made possible by viewers like you. If you'd like to join our community of more than 20,000 members, there will be a link to our membership page in the description below. I'd also like to thank everyone who donates directly via YouTube. Your support is greatly appreciated. It was announced midday on Friday that this year's Nobel Peace Prize has gone to Venezuelan opposition politician Maria Corina Machado for, in the words of the Nobel Committee, her tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela. And Donald Trump is far from pleased.
The Nobel Peace Prize was announced this morning. Your thoughts?
Which one?
The Nobel Peace Prize. Your thoughts?
The person who actually got the Nobel Prize called me and said, I'm accepting this in honor of you because you really deserved it. That a very nice thing to do. I didn't say then give it to me though. I think she might have. She was very nice.
Having been endorsed by the likes of Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu after Trump's tacit role in mediating a ceasefire in the 2-year-long conflict between Israel and Hamas, and amid his broader campaign to end foreign wars abroad, including his still unsuccessful attempt to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine, Trump has made no secret of his desire to secure this prize. Only 4 American presidents, including Trump's predecessor Barack Obama, have ever been awarded this prize. For months, Trump has repeatedly made public statements asserting that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, with the Financial Times saying that nobody has campaigned for a Nobel Peace Prize quite like Donald Trump. Some Norwegian officials even told The Guardian this week that Norway should be prepared for some diplomatic retaliation from Trump if he didn't win. But despite the media attention and credulity lent by large outlets to the idea that Trump might win by merit or intimidation, a few facts were unavoidable. The winner of the prize was selected long before Friday's announcement.
And you could also say it was given out for 24 and I was running for office in 24. You know, all of the transactions that we did in terms of closing. But there are those that say we did so much that they should have done it. But I don't take. I'm happy because I saved millions of lives.
Before last week's peace plan between Israel and Hamas was agreed to, and last-minute endorsements really didn't carry much sway. There's also a healthy degree of skepticism about whether peace in Gaza will hold. It's very early days, and history indicates that the ceasefire is more likely to be broken than not. Likewise, despite his claims to be helming the peace process between Russia and Ukraine, Trump has very little to show for it, as the thousands of Kyiv residents without electricity can attest. When it comes to results, Trump just doesn't have a consistent track record of bringing about lasting peace. At least, not yet, and not if he doesn't change tack when dealing with dictators. At the end of the day, Trump is concerned about his legacy. He covets recognition as a better peacemaker than those who came before him, and he wants tangible evidence of it. People also say that he really wants his face carved on Mount Rushmore. Ukrainian officials said this week that if Trump can bring about peace with Russia, they'll happily endorse him for the prize. And may that thought motivate him to crack down on Russia and apply himself towards ending the war ahead of October 2026. For our member question this week, one of our community members asked, "Do you ever feel like it's pointless reporting on what Trump says?" So I'm going to answer this one for a change. I write the script for this show at the same time every week, and throughout the week, I'm paying attention to the headlines to decide what stories we should feature. And I'm also on KI's social media team, so I get a good look at what people are interested in and how they react to various pieces of news. And then that in turn informs how I approach stories on this show when it's deadline time. And yes, most of the time we're making a lot of content about Trump, and it gets very strong reactions. So I wouldn't say that it feels pointless to report on what he says so much as exhausting. He's the leader of the most powerful country in the world, which has a huge impact on the present and future of this war. So a change in his rhetoric isn't insignificant, and it's never pointless to report on something that matters to Ukraine. But it can be a roller coaster from week to week, and it makes me feel a little crazy to be positive about his statements one week and upset the next, and then back to positive. It kind of makes you numb to reality over time, where every change in tune just feels like more mental legwork to explain. And for people who want to see an end to this war more than anything, namely Ukrainians, it feels like no positive development can ever really fully be trusted because the rug has been pulled out from under just too many times. It's a back and forth that ultimately kills any faith that Trump will ever achieve anything that looks like peace. Whether he can't or whether he won't, it really doesn't make a difference to the people every day fighting for their survival. I actually saw Trump speak in person during his first campaign in 2015 at this tiny airfield in rural Ohio near the college where I was a sophomore. And it's truly unbelievable to me that 10 years later and thousands of miles away, he's such a central part of my daily life. So I really, really hope that in 10 more years, this crazy period in history is a distant memory and we just have a much slower, more boring news cycle to report on. That's all for this week. We'll be back next Sunday with more news from Ukraine. If you appreciated this video, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent community. It's thanks to viewers like you that we can do this work, and we're so grateful for your support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.